Okay, you're all set, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening. Welcome to our public meeting Tuesday, July 4th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Can I have a move and a seconder to call the meeting to order? Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Have the meeting open at 6 o'clock. Call the chair. Are there any changes or to the agenda that we need to be notified of? Seeing none, we can done. Perfect. Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder for the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Approving the agenda as presented. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll go into new business. 4A, zoning bylaw 0523. Ms. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just share my screen and get the presentation set up here. There we go. Can everyone see the title page okay? Okay, great. Thank you. We have 3 zoning bylaw amendment applications before us this evening. So before we get started, I will read required wording under the Ontario Planning Act. This is a public meeting under Section 34 of the Ontario Planning Act. Any person may attend the public meeting and or make written or verbal representation either in support of or in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at this public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the Township of South Glengarry before the bylaw is decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Township of South Glengarry to the Ontario Land Tribunal, also known as the OLT. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the Township of South Glengarry before the bylaw is decided upon, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OLT unless there are reasonable grounds to do so. So our first item on the agenda this evening is a numbered company that's located at part of Lot 11, Plan 107, being Part 1 in Reference Plan 14R2989 in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in South Glengarry, located at 4910 9 Mile Road, Martintown. This site is well known as the Martintown Animal Hospital. This is a key map of where the subject property is located. The Martintown Animal Hospital is actually located on the triangular portion to the north. However, we're discussing this area that's outlined in black for the purpose of tonight's meeting. The applicant and owner of 4910 9 Mile Road has completed a lot addition, which is a consent file B11621 that acquired additional land to the south of the Martintown Animal Hospital that was once part of 4918 9 Mile Road. The applicant wishes to expand the existing parking lot to accommodate the existing Martintown Animal Hospital and potentially a future expansion of the hospital itself. And for those of you who have attended this site, you'll often notice that it's a very busy spot, hard to get parking, and we even have parking on the side of 9 Mile Road at times. This is a map that shows the area that was subject to the severance. So you'll see the area outlined in where my mouse is was the original parcel. The severed portion is the pink parcel that's now part of the Martintown Animal Hospital property to the north. And then the blue parcel retained is simply a residential building lot, and that has remained unchanged with the exception of the boundary of the property. This is a front view of the subject property of the animal hospital from 9 Mile Road facing west. The area to the left where there's trees and nice grass is the area where the parking lot will be expanded upon. So the purpose of this amendment is to rezone a 1.12 acre area of the subject property from residential 1 to hamlet commercial to permit the expansion of the existing Martintown Animal Hospital parking lot. All other applicable provisions of zoning bylaw 3809 as amended shall continue to apply, meaning that there's no other request to amend the property or no other exceptions or variances being requested at this time. The subject property is currently designated in rural settlement area. It's located in the Martintown Rural Settlement Area in the county official plan, and the proposed amendment conforms to the official plan and the provincial policy statement. So at this time, I believe the applicant, Mr. McNaughton, is available if there's any questions that I'm unable to answer. And I'm sure between the two of us, we'll be able to answer all of the committee's questions or the council's questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Mr. McNaughton, was there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that was very thorough. Thanks very much, Joanne.
Okay, and I see three other members of the community, Mr. Cameron, Mrs. Vanderlight, and Mr. LeBrun. I don't know, they might be here for the next one, but if they have any comments specific to this one, or council has a comment or question of Ms. Haley or Mr. McNaughton. Councilor Jaworski.
Hi, thank you, through Mayor McDonald. It's a question for Ms. Haley. So just to understand the process here, so the subject property is it's staying as a separate lot, or it's being added to the one? It's being added to the one that's the animal hospital, and the reason, and so it keeps its original zoning unless it gets amended. That's why we're going through this process? It doesn't take on the zoning of the lot it's being added to?
That is correct, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the lot addition is approved. The properties have merged. Now we want the same zoning on the new boundary of the property so that everything would be zoned Hamlet commercial. That would then allow them to expand their parking lot and eventually build something one day in the future if they choose to.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. McNaughton.
Thank you.
We'll move on to zoning bylaw 0723, Ms. Haley.
Sorry. We're moving on to the next zoning bylaw amendment application this evening. This is also another number company. This parcel of property is located at part of lot 18, concession to Indian Lands in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in South Glengarry, and it's located at 950 Boundary Road. And we do have a key map of the subject property. So just to help orient everyone, this to the north would be the CP rail, and then Tyatown Road would be slightly to the south. And then, of course, the city of Cornwall is located on the west side of the property directly across Boundary Road. And many of you would be very familiar with this property. It's been the home of St. John's transfer for a long time. I'm sure it looks very familiar to you. And the purpose of this amendment is to rezone the subject property from highway commercial and floodplain holding to highway commercial exception 9, to remove the floodplain holding zone and to permit the following additional uses: a cardlock establishment, a transportation terminal, a retail store, and a warehouse distribution center. All other applicable provisions of zoning bylaw 3809 as amended shall continue to apply, meaning that there's no other requested changes to the zoning for this parcel of property at this time. The applicant obtained a topographic survey to determine the existing elevations of the property, as almost the entire property was above the floodplain. Previously, the property was primarily zoned, had floodplain holding, with only a small portion of the property located in the highway commercial zone. So the survey was reviewed by the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. They also looked at our new LiDAR information, and they were able to determine that any portions of the subject property that still lay below the floodplain are not at risk of flooding due to surrounding topography. Therefore, they could support the removal of the floodplain holding zone, and it was felt to be good land use planning. So just to summarize that, the survey primarily showed the entire property to be above, with the exceptions of some small pockets here and there. At this time, there are no new structures being proposed. The applicant wishes to remove the floodplain holding zone in order to permit future development and site alteration, if and when that is to happen sometime in the future. The subject property is currently designated employment district in the county official plan, and it happens to fall within the urban settlement area of Glen Walter in our mapping. And the proposed amendment conforms to the official plan and the provincial policy statement. I do have a copy of the topographical survey that was completed. This is very difficult to see on your screen, but you can see all the different elevations that were taken by the surveyor to determine what parcels of property or what areas of the property were above and below. And almost entirely the property was above the floodplain. And it's not uncommon for our current floodplain mapping to be incorrect at times, because that mapping was originally completed and approved and provided to us by the province of Ontario, and it was dated between 1989 and 1991. And as you can see, this property has been developed for quite some time. It has a manicured lawn, a fairly large parking lot. So it probably isn't surprising that a majority of the property was located above the floodplain. And this is more of a zoomed in section just to show the location of the structure, as well as the entrance and then all the different elevations. So no written comments have been received to date from the members of the public. We did circulate all abutting property owners 120 meters, both on the city side as well as South Glengarry side. We did circulate this to the RCA. As I mentioned, they assisted in the process and reviewed the survey in advance of the application being filed, just to ensure that we could support and deem a zoning amendment application to be complete. The Raisin Region Conservation Authority is satisfied that the property is no longer subject to current RCA regulations and has the following comments. There is no evaluated provincially significant wetland on or adjacent to the subject property. There are no water courses on the subject property. And after reviewing the updated topographical information, there is no regulated flood hazard on the subject property. As I mentioned, the application was also circulated to the City of Cornwall. Their planning, economic development, and traffic departments have no concerns or objections to the proposed amendment. This zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council, and we plan on bringing a staff report, including a recommendation to council for decision in the near future, possibly even the next meeting if all goes well. To date, we've received no written comments from members of the public. I've received no oral comments either. And as I mentioned, this zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor. And we do have the agent of the property owner on the meeting this evening, Mr. Cameron, and I'm sure he can answer any specific questions in terms of their existing or proposed intentions for the property. So thank you.
Thank you. And I did see in the participants, there were a few others. Mr. Cameron, did you have anything you'd like to add? I don't know, Mr. Cameron, you are on our screen, but we can't hear you if you're trying to say something presently.
Hear me there now?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So I have no, like Joanne has described it perfectly, there's no plans for the subject property right this moment. It's just to get this floodplain holdings taken off the property, and the reason for some of the additional uses that we're implementing in addition to the highway commercial is because of the proximity to, you know, the industrial park next door and the kind of uses that are coming up in the near future. So that was pretty much everything was handled as, you know, as we envisaged the site would be, you know, going towards some of these other uses like warehousing or truck terminal, in addition to what's there right now. So that's about it from my point of view.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? Counselor Jaworski.
Thank you, through Mayor McDonald. I have a question for Ms. Haley. Just if you could refresh my memory for highway commercial. I just, again, I should have looked up the definition part of the call, but I had assumed that cardlock was already part of highway commercial. But or is everything that you're listing as additional uses, is that something that would not already be in highway commercial? And I was wondering also if you could comment on the fact that this is employment district, this zoning amendment, does it make any changes to that employment district designation?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, cardlock establishment is already a permitted use in the highway commercial zone. And to answer your question about the employment district is more of a unique designation in the official plan, where it provides a lot more flexibility from a land use planning and permitted land use perspective to accommodate more of the trucking industry, transportation, manufacturing. And you've probably noticed that area of Boundary Road is really evolving. It's really changing, and a lot of uses are coming up or being constructed or opening up to accommodate that trucking industry. So this will just be very consistent with what's already permitted or already existing on the city side. And I would imagine we will probably see more of a need or request for uses like this to be established on South Glengarry side. So I believe I've answered your question, Councillor.
If you don't mind, so you did say that cardlock establishment is already included, but I guess of the list that's been listed, which ones would be not included? So which ones are an update?
Okay, so one moment, please, and I will answer that. So a transportation terminal, a retail store, and a warehouse distribution center would be in addition, that is currently not found in the highway commercial zone.
Okay, great, thank
And
you.
we've highlighted the cardlock establishment, not to be confusing by any means, but it was something that the applicant pointed out that could be of interest for future use. So that's was part of their application.
Given some of my newness to land use planning, would being north of the tracks or south of the tracks have anything to do with it, or everything is the same on both sides of the tracks?
That's right. I think I understood your question, Mr. Mayor. So on the north and south side of the tracks, located from Highway 401 to Tyatown Road, is all designated employment district. The zoning is primarily highway commercial. We have recently done one zoning change for a property slightly to the north and brought it into a light industrial zone. But the uses are fairly consistent on that side of the property, on that side of the road, I should say.
Thank you. Were there any questions further of council or from public? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to zoning bylaw. Let's get to that page. 0823, Ms. Haley.
Okay. Okay, so I'm now moving on to our last zoning amendment application. One moment, please. I'll just get to the right location. Here we go. So this parcel of property is located on part of lots 15 and 16, concession 1 Indian lands, being part of lot 2 and 41 on Judges Plan 101 in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in South Glengarry. This property is currently a vacant parcel, so it doesn't have a street address, but this is the location of the property. You can see to the north where my mouse is, that is Tyatown Road, and it goes all the way to the south, a little past Grays Creek, abutting the Raisin Region Conservation Authority property, and very close to a subdivision known as Place Saint Laurent subdivision, which is accessed from County Road 2. It's also located on the east side of Holy Trinity High School. So in 2022, the property owner applied to sever approximately 31.7 acres of land to create a commercial property and to retain approximately 104.72 acres that is proposed to be a commercial and a residential use. The severance application was approved on January 12th, 2023 by the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, subject to conditions, one being a zoning amendment to support the proposed use. Mr. Mayor, I have an error in the retained land. I'll correct that later in my presentation. I apologize for that. I believe that's the total acreage. So this is another map that's very similar to the key map, where the area in pink represents the approved severance application. That area represents one of the portions of property that is proposed to be rezoned to commercial. And then you'll see the retained land is outlined in blue. And again, this application was known as B15122. This was a map that was provided to us from the applicants at the time of the severance application. You'll see here that the proposed area to be severed is the 31.72, with the retained land being 73 acres. Sorry for that error in that first slide. So the subject property is currently being farmed on the northern end and in the middle portion, with forested lands towards the mid and south of the property, and there are trails that are located on the southern end that are accessible to the public, although they are privately owned by the applicant being the numbered company. The purpose of the proposed amendment before us this evening is to rezone the subject property from open space, highway commercial, and floodplain holding to general commercial, exception 7, residential 1, exception 19, holding, and floodplain. So this map is going to outline what is being proposed. So the northern portion that's highlighted here in pink also includes the area that was recently severed. This area, if it was approved, would be then zoned to general commercial exception 7. And the area in the corner that is identified with the blue hatching would be zoned floodplain. Currently, it falls in a holding pattern. The area that's known as the retained land for the severance application, and then it's highlighted in yellow here, is then going to be rezoned, if approved, to residential 1, exception 19, holding, and with the area along Grace Creek to remain in a floodplain zone. So the proposed general commercial area is approximately 43 acres in total. The general commercial exception 7 zone will reduce the required watercourse setback from 30 meters to 15 meters and require that the 15-meter setback contain a vegetative buffer consisting of a mix of native plants, and will permit the following additional uses: mini warehouse and storage, auction establishment, card lock establishment, motor vehicle dealership, and motor vehicle service station. The proposed residential 1 holding zone is approximately 62 acres in area, and the purpose of the holding symbol is to ensure that all applicable studies that are required based on the policies in effect at the time development is proposed for this area are completed to the satisfaction of the municipality before council considers to remove the holding symbol. The residential 119 holding will also reduce the required watercourse setback from 30 meters to 15 meters, and also require the 15-meter setback to contain a vegetative buffer consisting of a mix of native plants. And again, all other applicable provisions of the zoning bylaw will continue to apply for this parcel of property. The applicant completed a scope environmental impact study as per the request of the township and as per our current policies. And this study focused on the fish habitat contained in the Upper Fly Creek and Grace Creek drains. The environmental impact statement supports the proposed development with limitations/conditions. And the scoped environmental, the scoped EIS concluded that a 15-meter setback from all 3 warm water systems is appropriate if the measures outlined in the report are followed. So as I mentioned, it has some limitations or conditions. And when we talk about requiring to have a buffer of native plant species located within that 15-meter setback. The report, of course, is much more detailed. It's very difficult to bring all of that information into summarizing it. But if development were to occur for this parcel of property, it would be subject to site plan control, and we'd be ensuring that these native plants are listed in a landscape plan as part of the site plan submission. They will also be required to have permits from the Raisin Region Conservation Authority in their regulated area. And it's possible that they may also need a Department of Fisheries and Ocean, which is the federal government, approvals for certain developments. And that would be looked at the time when development is proposed. And we'd be looking at that during site plan control also. So the EIS is currently being peer reviewed. So what we do is, because the Conservation Authority rules have changed by the provincial government and they're no longer able to provide that service to municipalities, we then retain a professional that's qualified to do peer reviews on environmental impact studies. And that, as I mentioned, is currently being completed. We expect to have the results of that peer review by July 12th. And any updates or amendments to the report that is suggested by the peer reviewer will be required to be made prior to a recommendation being made to council, or to a decision being made by council on the proposed amendment. There is a significant woodland constraint on the southern end of the subject property. Some of you may be aware that there was recently some tree removal that occurred on the property, and there was also tree removal that occurred, I believe, in 2021 and 2022 towards the middle of the property. Because development is not proposed at this time within 120 meters of any significant woodland constraint, we did not require an environmental impact study for significant woodlands as per the policy. However, this may be required in the future on the southern end if there is proposed development. The subject property is currently designated rural district in the county official plan. It's located just outside of the urban settlement area of Glenwalter. And the plan proposed, or excuse me, the zoning amendment proposed does conform to the official plan and the provincial policy statement. I have received no written comments from members of the public or oral comments that are specific to this zoning amendment notice and application. And the application was circulated to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, and they have provided the following summary. The RRC's role in this file is limited to providing comments as a review agency and not as an approval authority for zoning bylaw amendments. The RRCA does not object to the zoning bylaw amendment, as it is our understanding that future development would be directed outside of the hazard areas outlined above. Any future development or site alterations within the Conservation Authority regulated features outlined above would require permits from the Raisin Region Conservation Authority pursuant to board-approved policies. This zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council, and a staff report including a recommendation will be brought to council for a decision in the near future. And that's all I have at this time. Mr. Mayor, we also have the applicant or the agent for the applicant, Mr. Cameron, available to answer any specific questions if council or members of the public have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Mr. Cameron, did you have anything to add? At present, if you are trying to add something, you are muted.
Okay, the only thing I would add is that the property was partially zoned highway commercial, which would allow probably some uses that weren't compatible with the school next door, which is and part of it was open space. So in getting the general 31 acre site set up for a commercial use, it was decided to go to this general commercial, which would be less intrusive than the highway commercial would permit in everyone's opinion, as far as I can see. So that would be the only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. I do see Mr. Jacobs and Mrs. Van der Leyck too on, do they wish to say something? I believe they're both in the RRCA. Mr. Jacobs, I see your hand up. You are presently muted.
Hi, good evening. I have no comment at this time. I think the hand was an accident. Sorry.
Oh. Okay, thank you. Any members of council have any questions or comments? Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Question for Ms. Haley. So if I understand correctly, the water body that flows through this zoning amendment would require that there's this 15-meter vegetative buffer, which sounds like a very good thing. And I think it's the first time I've come across that, or certainly it's the first time I remember that stipulation. But my question is, how does that that and the fact that there's an area that's still noted floodplain that also seems to be the area where the water body flows through. So like which takes priority, or what if it's shown as floodplain, can you do anything there regardless of that? Like, it looks like it goes beyond, like my measurement is it goes beyond that 15-meter distance from the water body. If you could comment on that, thank you.
Yes, I can, through you, Mr. Mayor. So you'll see that there's 2 areas that will remain in floodplain if the zoning amendment is approved. In the current floodplain zone, once the holding is removed, it means there's no site alteration or development permitted in that location. So in the environmental impact study where they are recommending that planting occurs, the planting would be permitted to be done in that area, and it's required to be done within a 15-meter setback. So we would require the 15-meter setback to be delineated on a survey. And then we would follow the recommendations in the environmental impact study to ensure that there's the plantings that they're proposing to be located in that location. So to answer your question, if the floodplain zone happens to go beyond the 15 meters, no site alteration or development will happen in there, with the exception of planting will occur 15 meters from the top of bank to the edge of that 15 meters.
So if I understand correctly, there has to be this vegetative buffer from top of bank 15 meters out. And then from that 15 meters to the edge of the floodplain boundary, that there can't be any site alterations. Is that correct?
No, I'll re-explain that. So the 15-meter setback is from the top of bank of the water course, 15 meters out. That is the required setback where there's no site alteration or development. That is also to be the area where the vegetative planting is to occur. But what I was trying to say to you earlier, based on your map, and you mentioned your measurement, let's say the floodplain happens to be 18 meters from the top of bank, the boundary goes 18 meters out, the vegetative planting will only occur within the 15, so the first 15. And so there's still no site alteration within the 18 meters because the floodplain zone doesn't permit that.
Okay, no, I think that's what I was trying.
Okay,
We're
we're saying the same thing, just differently. Okay.
I think so. So there's that extra in your hypothetical example, there's this extra 3 meters that
Yes.
doesn't have site alterations, but it doesn't get the buffer. It doesn't get the native plant buffer.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions of council? I did have one, Ms. Haley. You had mentioned that the whole holding and the benefit of having it in the holding. Would you mind sharing that just briefly?
Sure. So working with the property owner at this time, there doesn't appear to be any intentions to develop the southern parcel of property. And so when we hear that, we want to make sure that we're only permitting development to occur once we have all the information that's necessary. So let's say that southern portion, if it's placed in the residential 1 zone, eventually becomes a plan of subdivision. During the plan of subdivision process, a variety of studies would need to be required, such as a hydrogeological and terrain analysis study, which would look at soil conditions, water quality and quantity to ensure that we could support a subdivision on private services. We would also be looking at any constraints that are on that property. So any natural heritage features being wetlands, woodlands, ANSIs. We'd also be looking at any hazards. And so a variety of studies would be listed as a requirement prior to accepting a development application. And then again, to use the example of moving forward with a plan of subdivision, if they end up with a residential subdivision, a condition of the subdivision draft approval would be to remove the holding. So it's the very last step of really the process that we're doing to make sure that we're making good land use planning decisions and we're considering all the policies in effect at the time of that development moving forward before we would recommend to council to remove the holding. It's basically teeth that the municipality has to ensure that the property owner or developer doesn't move forward too quickly without having all the information to deem an application complete and that we can support.
Thank you for that. Were there any further questions of council? Any comments further from public or agents? All right, well, thank you very much then. We'll get a future staff report incoming to council. But I will move then to call for adjournment as we have received the input of the public. I'm not misstepping my procedure here, Ms. Haley. Excellent. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the move by Martin Lang? Seconded by Councillor McDonnell. Be it resolved that the public meeting come to close at 6:38 p.m. at the call of the chair.